Welcome to the first of the Introduction to Using Methware videos. Today in this video we're going to be talking about logging into Methware, how to keep your computer secure from other people accessing information on it, how to change your password, how to open up a patient record and locate the record that you need, what is on the information screen for each patient, and what's in the actions menu that you can use to get to your information. The first thing that you'll want to do is look on your desktop. In order to open up Methware, you're going to look for the Methware symbol, the white M. It might just say Methware 4, or it might say shortcut to Methware. Either way, be sure it's not another version of Methware like Methware 3. You want to be sure and open up Methware 4. And the first thing that you're going to see is the login window. Before you start using Methware, your supervisor will assign a username and a password for you so you'll be able to get into the system. In this case, my username is already there. Oh, and let me just say, this is not a live version of the program. This is just one I use for training purposes, so there aren't any actual patients on the screens that I'll be showing you today. My version of it looks a little bit different from what you'll see when you're using it in the office. There's some differences in just sort of a few small features. There won't be a lot of differences, so you'll definitely recognize it. Okay, so just enter your password. And the first screen that you see when you open up is going to be a patient selection screen. Let me go back for 1 second into the logging in. If I exit out of that patient selection screen, you'll notice that I'm still in Methware, but there's no way for getting into the computer without entering my login information again. So in order to do that, I would go up here to Connect, select Local, and there you have your login again. So that's a good way to keep the computer secure if you're going to be stepping away from it, especially a computer that is out in the open that other people might have access to. You don't want to necessarily log out of Methware altogether. If you just do this, then the next user is going to be required to put their login information in. Not only does that prevent other people from accessing the information on the system, you don't want a coworker to start entering notes or putting in information that's going to be under your name. Okay, so there we go, log in again. And when you open this patient selection window in the clinic, there's going to be a much longer list here. It's going to show you all the patient numbers that are in the clinic. You will be able to scroll up and down to it to select a patient. But generally, when you're working with somebody, if you don't recall their number, you can just ask them what their number is, type it in, hit enter, and there you have the first screen that shows up for that patient. When you open the screen, you'll see a selection of tabs here. They're sort of set up just like a file folder with different information. So the first screen is going to give you the basic information, the demographic kind of things, name, address, contact information. Let's go back though to the patient selection window first. When you want to go in and find a patient, if you don't know their number, but you do know their name, you want to work on their file, or whatever the case may be, you can go down here to Advanced. And this is a short list, but it's going to list the patients by their name and by their number. So let's say you know the first name of the patient that you want to search for. If you select the first name of the patient and then refresh list, it'll give you an alphabetical column of patient first names, and you can just scroll up and down and then click on the one that you want to select, and it will open up that patient. Let's exit out again. One last thing about this patient location screen. By default, it is set to the patients that are active in the clinic, not patients that have been discharged. But if you are looking for somebody who has been discharged from the clinic, you just select all and hit refresh. So here it shows one item here from the discharge list. Okay, and to get out of that screen, just back to the regular one, you can click on that advanced button and that will get you out. So what I'm going to be working on today is this patient that I have set up called number 900. That is just a test patient. And in your clinic, there should be, depending on what location you're in, there should be a test patient already set up that you can use to kind of practice and see what features do what. Just ask your supervisor which one you're supposed to use. It may not be 900 for each clinic. Just ask what number it is, and then you can go and play around. If you make any changes, it's not going to affect, of course, other patient records, and it shouldn't affect any kind of reports that we do. So feel free to play around and use all the different features. In most cases, for most people though, you will not have access to the kinds of features that will allow you to adjust reports, say, that we do at the end of the day, like medication reports. So if you see here there's a blue highlighted medicate, that's an option that only the nurse or pharmacist or maybe other medical personnel have access to. We don't want everybody to be able to medicate patients. So we have a permission system in Methware that lets us give access to some features for some users and no access for other users that don't need them. Okay, before we go to our practice patient, I want to say a quick word about how to set your password. When you get set up in the system, your supervisor will set in just a temporary password for you to use in order to go in and change your password to something that you'll use every day. You should also just periodically go in and change your password just for security's sake. And here's how to do that. Go to the tab at the top here called Configuration and go down to Permissions. Click on that. Now my window looks a little bit different from what you're going to see, but you'll see here that there's a list of users. All you need to do is find your name. It may be the only name in that list, but just make sure your name is highlighted, and then go down to the field for the password, and you can just delete what's in there and then set your own password. I recommend using a password that's going to be easy enough for you to remember, something that's not too long and cumbersome, because you'll probably be repeatedly logging into the computer during the day, and you don't want something that's just going to slow you down. Okay, so once you enter that new password, there's not a save button. You just exit out of that window and it's automatically saved. In order to test it, you could just exit out of that window, go back to Connect, down to Local, and enter your new password. And there we go. All right, so let's go to our patient now, who's going to be our practice patient. This patient's name has been given Christopher Cantaloupe. He's not a patient, he's a cantaloupe. So this is all just made up information in his screen, so we don't have any confidentiality worries at this point. Okay, so it's pretty self-explanatory. The first part of the first column, you'll see that they've got their clinic ID number, their first name, last name, address, all that kind of thing. It's important to have this entered accurately because the computer uses this information to produce labels that are used for the medication bottles and for the urine drug screen bottles. So we don't want any confusion about somebody's identification. So make sure that it's spelled out and entered correctly. Okay, so we've got fields here for a variety of different phone numbers that you can enter, a date of birth field, social security number, and I ask that people put in the social security numbers with the dashes rather than just one long series of digits, and I'll explain why that is in just a minute. There's a field for their driver's license number. I always put the state for the driver's license and the expiration date. The reason for that is that our state regulations require that each patient have a state picture ID, and we have to have a current copy of their ID on file. So at a glance then you'll be able to look at that and know when the ID expires and know that they do in fact have a state of Georgia ID. If they come into treatment and they don't have a Georgia ID but they have some other state ID, for example, or maybe they have a passport or a military ID, I believe is acceptable for getting into treatment at a methadone program. But if they don't have a Georgia state ID, we generally give them a few days to go and get one. But anyway, putting in the state and the expiration date will just make it easy to find that at a glance. Height and weight is pretty self-explanatory. Central registry number, I'm going to come back to. That's a number that is assigned by the state to each person who's enrolled in a methadone treatment program. Then we've got anniversary and admit date. Admit date is pretty self-explanatory. It's the date and actually the time that they are admitted to our program. Anniversary could be a little bit different. I'll come back and explain that one. But just to finish out this column, there's another date for schedule date. You don't have to worry about that because that comes from their prescription. It gives their prescription date, their treating physician, and the drug type. Let me jump back up to central registry number. We'll do some more explanation on the central registry, the procedure for getting the number assigned to the patient, but just for now it's enough for you to know that when a person first enrolls in treatment, we're required to apply to the state central registry system to get this. It's usually about a 9-digit number, I believe, but we have to get this number assigned to them from the state before we can actually medicate the patient. So that's very important to have. If the patient is enrolled in another clinic, then when we do a search of the state database, we'll know that. And we just want to make sure that we're not enrolling somebody so that they have dual enrollment and can possibly go to more than one clinic and receive methadone. The anniversary date that I compared to the admission date a minute ago can sometimes be different from the admission date. That's because the anniversary date is actually the date on which the person starts treatment without interruption, and it's their date of continuous treatment. So say, for example, you have a new patient who's coming into the clinic, but they're a transfer patient, not new to treatment. They've been in treatment in another clinic someplace else, and they haven't had a lapse in treatment. They're just going directly from their other clinic, getting admission to our clinic. Maybe they've moved or changed jobs, whatever the reason might be. But if they started treatment in their initial clinic 2 years ago, their anniversary date is going to be that date from 2 years ago. And that's important because we use that date to determine what their eligibility is for take-home doses, and we need to look at how long they've been in treatment. So they may have been admitted to our clinic on February 16th, but they may have started this treatment episode back in 2014. So it's important to know what that date is. Okay, just a quick word on our drug types that we have. We do prescribe just methadone. There are some other type of opioid drugs that are used in opioid treatment programs, but here we use just methadone. We do have 2 different formulations. It comes in a liquid form and a tablet. The tablets are 40 milligrams each. They're orange. We call them a disc, or a discette is what they are. And the liquid that we use is a cherry liquid. If you look over to the next column, it tells you what the patient's dose is. When you see these fields on the live Methware program that you'll be using in the clinic, they'll probably be highlighted a certain color. That's just for easy reference for us. And it may be highlighted orange to indicate that they are taking the discette because the disc is an orange color, or it may be highlighted in pink to let you know that it's the liquid formulation without having to actually look down at the drug type. Okay, I'm going to pause the video here and we will continue on in part 2 of Introduction to Methware.